There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down, and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
I think we're going to go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Just a Game. I am me, you are you. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you could be here. We are less than a week away from the start of the NHL regular season, although we are heading into the Thanksgiving long weekend here in Canada. So for some, a little bit of a late start to the season. Welcome. Everybody is welcome. We are an inclusive podcast, broadcasting today from Treaty 6 territory, as a matter of fact, Treaty 6 territory. We've got a lot of ground to cover. Holy cow, since last we spoke, the Toronto Blue Jays management, whoever you want to, nobody's ever going to take full responsibility, but somebody shot themselves in the foot. And what a waste that season was for the Jays. We'll get into that. Some NFL news. The big news, really for us, is the fact that it appears for the second time there's a deal in place for the Calgary Flames to get a new home. This seems to be a done deal. This seems to be signed, sealed, and delivered. Everybody said all the right things. Everybody shook the right hand, so to speak. However, we'll remember a couple of years ago and close to Christmas, the rug got pulled out from underneath everybody's feet. So once the shovels get in the ground, once the pilings start, I guess I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. But until then, it's still, still no pictures to look at. That's the crazy part. Still no pictures to look at. Let's get right to it, though, with our guest. And he's coming back and joining us courtesy of Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary, soon to be 77. Two locations are open right now: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, Bow Ridge Road Northwest. I don't know where you were this morning when you woke up, but where I woke up, it was about -5, -6. So we know the white stuff is going to come at some point. We know that everybody's going to rush off into the mountains pretty quick. So make sure you check them out. Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. From The Athletic, the Hall of Famer, our friend, is back. Frank Duhatschek joins us on a Friday. I think he's there. Eric,
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
I'm here.
I cannot see him, nor can I hear him. But that's okay. That's the way things work around here. It just takes a while, and then we'll get him on. He's kind enough to join us this week. He's going to be back next week, too, when the season opens up, and then we'll get back into it. There he is. Hello, Mr. Duhatschek. How are you?
I'm really good. It's Friday afternoon. It's Thanksgiving weekend. The sun is out. The temperature's going up. I got a tea time at Water Valley on Sunday. Life is pretty great.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. I think John Bean thinks life is pretty great. Let's start there. I know we don't spend a lot of time talking about the locals, but the news of an arena. We did this on the old show for many years. We talked about the possibilities. We watched Edmonton get a new building. I know off the top I said, the rug got pulled out before. This does kind of feel like they're finally across the finish line for real, doesn't it?
Yes, and I actually watched the live stream from, I think it was City Hall on Twitter on a couple of days ago, and it looked like there was enough of a consensus from all of the parties, and that it's hard to imagine that it could go off the rails again. But as you say, this has happened before. Until there's shovels in the ground, I don't think that anybody is going to be happy. Actually, I don't think until there's a ribbon cutting ceremony that some people are going to be happy, because it's going to take forever, and there are so many steps along the way. So this is the beginning of the beginning. And what they're talking about, 2026, 2027 at the earliest. When does anything get built on time anymore? It just seems like there are delays and delays and delays. So we'll see. But I do think that in terms of there's two issues there. One is that how that will affect the city of Calgary and the fan base of the Calgary Flames, and then how the hockey team operates, because so much of what we heard in the past 6 or 9 months focused on, people, do they want to be here? Do they not want to be here? The subject of an old, antiquated arena kept coming up. You'd think, okay, it's your workplace, it shouldn't matter that much, but clearly it does. And clearly when you're trying to attract free agents to your team and to try to make your team and your city a destination, things like, a brand new state-of-the-art building matter a lot. I mean, I was covering the team when the Saddle Dome was a state-of-the-art facility, and people would come here and they would marvel at it, at the innovation, at the design, at the amenities that they had here that they that weren't available anywhere else. So that was 83, a long time ago. but let's keep our fingers crossed that this thing goes forward, and that it's a good deal for everyone. The one thing about it is that I have a large circle of friends here, and not everybody is a hockey fan. And when we discuss this project, they want there to be something in it for people that aren't concerned about 41 home games annually for the Calgary Flames. Will this help create a renewal of that part of town? Will it be good for the city going forward 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Will it create this vital downtown area that that's part of the theory behind pouring all of these resources into it? So we'll see. We'll see. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I'm still blown away, absolutely blown away that we don't have pictures to look at. I don't know how you're selling anybody on a dream. I don't know how you're selling. To me, I know we've got, city blocks to look at, but there's no vision for this. There's no, give me some of the sizzle, sell me some of the sizzle. And there should be some new technologies, Eric. I mean, we look at what's going on in Vegas. There should be some new technologies that this building will have.
Well, you're right. And Ryan Pike asked that question at the press conference of when there would be some schematics, and the answer was in time. So not great, but I do remember because when it looked like the first building was going online, I did a story for where I worked, The Athletic. We had an architecture what's the word I'm looking for? A series of stories on building construction, and it was in the context of what do you do during a pandemic, and will people ever feel safe in an area inside a building, and then speaking to various people that build buildings for this story. It was phenomenal. Essentially, a couple of people characterized it as really what it is one giant television studio with 18,000 seats or however many seats there are, because every seat is going to be wired. There has to be, every single patron nowadays is going to need Wi-Fi because they're looking at their phones, they're taking pictures with their phones, they're placing a bet with their phones. So when you think about the things that were important in '83 compared to the things that are important now, it's a night and day difference. So yeah, and the beauty of being the latest and the greatest is that you can take advantage of all of the latest technologies. So we'll see what streaming does for broadcasting in the next 5 to 10 years, and how television rights deals will change, and how many people will need to be in the building at any given time to broadcast games, to do the radio broadcast, to write stories for websites, and if there are any newspapers left by then. So yeah, I don't have the specifics of any of those things in mind, but you can certainly find it on our website if you do a search and you're a subscriber, because it was a fascinating project, and it wasn't just indoor buildings; it was outdoor buildings, and the technologies are. In terms of concrete and soundproofing, washrooms. I mean, everything. They're thinking of everything these days. An area for people who have dogs and need to have a rest area for dogs. I mean, it's incredible what they're thinking about in terms of new buildings right now.
Well, we'll leave the building. Let's talk a little bit about the hockey club. I think locally, clearly lots of stories coming in. I'm not sure how big a story the Calgary Flames are league-wide heading into this season, but new captain, coach, and general manager. And
I popped by a couple of days ago when they were practicing at Winsport, and that day Ryan Huska was speaking, Jonathan Huberdeau was speaking, Nathan Kadri was speaking, and Jacob Markstrom was speaking. And I thought at the end of that, I said, well, here really are the four pieces that will matter the most for a successful season. So, first of all, the atmosphere is way lighter. You can just tell, Kadri was wrapping up a fairly long availability because there were a lot of questions about the Blue Jays. So Huberdeau was waiting patiently, and they were kind of teasing each other back and forth about, like how hard Huberdeau shoots or doesn't shoot and how often he's going to shoot and so on and so forth. And just the kind of banter that you're supposed to get from any hockey team. I mean, you play in your beer league team. When I used to play, when your kids used to play, I mean, part of the joy of playing the sport is the back and forth, and that seemed to be missing last year. That just didn't. It seemed like a very serious business, and so right away that seemed like a positive sign. I every time I listen to Ryan Huska speak, I'm impressed at how detailed and aware he is. I was going to say nuanced, but it's more than that, because there's a tendency, I think, sometimes for people to go into coach speak and you just hear the same blather over and over again. And when the question about Huberdeau came up, the easy answer would be, yeah, he needs to shoot more. But the real answer and the correct answer was, we need to rely on him to use his instincts as a star player in the National Hockey League to decide when is the right time to shoot and when is the right time to pass. And so, yes, we do think he has a good enough shot, and if he increases the volume, then that will maybe allow those passes to get through a bit more. But I thought, okay, that's the right answer. You have to trust his instincts. You can coach him. You can give him some feedback and input. But the minute you start telling him to do something that goes against his grain, then he's not going to have a successful season. I think about. I watch the NFL because I've got Justin Fields in my fantasy team, and look at the change in him from the first 2 weeks to the third and the fourth week, when basically the only difference was just play freer, right? Just play freer, and that's so critical in every professional sport. So, and then Kadri just seems like somebody who's going to come back and be a much more impactful player than he was a year ago. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that he was that X factor on a Stanley Cup championship team in Colorado. And when he wasn't there last year, they had no way of replacing him. They just simply wasn't the same team. So if he can be that important a player that short of time ago, he can be that player again in Calgary. And then, Markstrom, same thing. 2 years ago, he looked like, a top 5 goalie in the National Hockey League, and last year, very average. And so if you get the kind of goaltending you can get from Markstrom, if you can get the type of two-way play you can get from Kadri, if you get the type of offense you can get from Huberdeau, and if Ryan Huska as the coach can keep it all together, and he's given me every indication that he can, I think there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful for the season that lies ahead for the Flames.
Well, today is Friday. That means your notebook comes out at The Athletic. So we may as well follow the path of the former general manager to his new home. You made a bold prediction today. I was going to ask you about challengers or picks or favorites. But let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. What's caught your eye?
Well, yeah. So the piece you're referencing is the fact that next week all of our staff predictions will come out, and it's funny. I had a great conversation with Ray Ferraro this week for another story that's publishing next week. And Ray works for ESPN, and they're forced to make predictions. And he said when he makes his, he calls them guesses, not predictions. And I thought, okay, that is a much better way of saying it than what we do, because that's what it is. It's an educated guess. You try to take the information at hand, and you assess it, and then you make a guess, and then sometimes you're right, and most of the time you're wrong. But I was sitting there, after the assignment came, and looking at the teams and just collecting your thoughts in your head, and it's like, I think this could be Toronto's year. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I'm going to try to make the case for why this is Toronto's year. And partly it's a roster construction thing, and partly it is the fact that nothing operates in a vacuum in the National Hockey League. So if we start at that point, the best division in hockey, in my opinion, is the Atlantic Division. And right now, I think the best team in the best division in hockey is Toronto. And that's because last year they were the second best team, and the team that finished ahead of them, the Boston Bruins, I think has taken a step back. This is not rocket science. I mean, there is no Patrice Bergeron there. There is no David Krejci there. They weren't able to go into the market because of cap constraints and find someone that could fill in as a true number one and a true number two. So they are cobbling together a center ice core from among Pavel Zacha, had a great year last year. Charlie Coyle, serviceable NHLer, young kid. Poitras, don't know a thing about him. That is not the same. That is not the same. And the reality is, even if they had returned the same team, 65 wins like Boston had last year, that just isn't doable again, I don't think. So, then you go through the improving teams. Yes, Detroit is better. Yes, Ottawa's better. Yes, Buffalo's better. Well, the long history of the National Hockey League is better is one thing, but the first step is making the playoffs. And then rarely does a team make the playoffs and then surge all the way through the playoffs. It can happen, but mostly you climb the ladder one rung at a time, and those teams are still, in the bottom third of that ladder. So I don't think they're ready to win. Montreal, they're the last place team. They're on the way, but a long way off. And Tampa is starting without their Vezina Trophy caliber goaltender. They're all a year older. They've done a great job of keeping that nucleus together to compete for as long as they possibly can by sacrificing a lot of futures to get the pieces to support the core group. But they look like they're hovering, and I think that that's the best you can say about them. And then Florida's a wild card too. And they barely made the playoffs last year, and if Bobrovsky doesn't play the way he did in the playoffs, they're probably not in the finals. So the net of all of that is that Toronto is the best team. Does the best team always win? No, but I think they have a legitimate chance. And then you look at the roster construction. Okay, I get it. There seems to be a big hole on defense. The only consequential move they did was bringing in one of the worst defensemen in the National Hockey League last year, John Klingberg. Why did they do that? Well, the reason is they got very little offense from defense last year. They had Morgan Riley, who had 41 points, and Mark Giordano had 24. I think Rasmus Sandin was third if you count the 52 games he played there before he got traded to Washington. But it's thin. They do not have a modern style defense. They don't have a Cale Makar. They don't have a Devontae. They don't have an Adam Fox. They don't have a Quinn Hughes. So and they're not. Those guys aren't available. So the thing about Klingberg, he was not very good defensively last year, and he didn't really even have that great an offensive year. But it wasn't that long ago that this guy was an important player on Dallas. And I just remember the way he played against Calgary in the bubble. He was a really good player. And who else would remember how he played in the bubble? Brad Treliving, because that was against Calgary, the team he was running at the time. So it's an inexpensive gamble to bring in a guy that gives you a piece and helps you in an area where you're weak. And the reality is, the team that goes on the ice on October 10th or 11th or whenever their first game is not necessarily the team that you'll have in place on March the 3rd or 5th or 7th or whenever the trade deadline is. You can tweak and move people around. But I think the moves up front to get grittier, Bertuzzi's going to help, Domi's going to help. Their top 12 is better today, I think, than a year ago. Their goaltending is pretty much the same. It was good enough last year. I mean, Samsonov did beat Vasilevsky in the first round. Aiden Hill won the Stanley Cup last year. Darcy Kemper won a Stanley Cup the year before. I don't think you need the second coming of George Vezina anymore to necessarily in goal to necessarily win. So I think they could easily be in the Final Four. And once you're in the Final Four, who knows? It can go any way. Who's hurt, who isn't, who's playing well, who's out of gas. There's so many variables in the league. But I do think, it's so easy to just say Toronto won't win because they never win. That to me is a bit specious. I just think that you have to analyze where they're at. They have a good team, and things that make them good are still there. They still have Austin Matthews. They still have Mitch Marda. They still have Nylander. They still have Tavares. Those guys are good hockey players. In the case of Matthews, he's a sensational hockey player. So we'll see. I mean, I'm probably wrong, but I do think that there is a strong case to be made that this could be their year.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask you, and you by writing this, it just works out perfectly, because I was a little taken aback this week when I read, friends of ours up in Edmonton referring to the local team there as the Stanley Cup favorite. And I'm like, I thought that's a little presumptuous. But as I did a little digging, there seems to be a general consensus that Edmonton in the West, Carolina in the East. Is that, your pick aside, do you see those two teams as potential favorites?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you can make the case in the West for about 4 teams. I mean, one of the things that I'm working on right now is, assessing where Vegas is at and which Vegas essentially we're going to see this year. The one that won the Stanley Cup last year, or the one that missed the playoffs 2 years ago. It's crazy. But they have a really good team, and they have a big team and a strong team. And so I think you have to think that Vegas is in the mix. You have to think that Edmonton's in the mix. They were a little unlucky not to beat Vegas in the playoffs last year. Their goaltending faltered at a point where they needed a little bit more stalwart net minding, and in fact it was Vegas that got it when Aiden Hill came in for Laurent Brossoit got hurt. So such a I don't have to tell you as a goaltender.
Owner of equipment.
Yes, all right. How it can turn on a dime at that position. So if you look again at what they've done, I think it's weird factors like is Matthias Ekholm really going to be healthy, or is this hip thing that's been bothering him in training camp going to linger? And if it is going to linger, then they're not strong enough on defense either, because Nurse is fine and Bouchard is getting better, and Kulak and Ceci, if they're a third pair, that's one of the better third pairs in the league. But they're that second pair is a little bit up in the air right now. Connor Brown's going to help if he comes back from that knee injury. They're McDavid is McDavid, Draisaitl is Draisaitl. That they're really good and hungrier than ever. And so so I would say if you're sort of just looking at percentages, Vegas and Edmonton for sure in the Pacific. Colorado, I think they've got a lot of questions there. I mean, 5 of their top 9 forwards that will play in their top 9 are new this year. And some of them are players with lots to prove, like Jonathan Drouin, like Ryan Johansson. But if these guys can be the best versions of themselves, and they can supplement the things that McKinnon and Rantanen and Makar and Taves do, then Colorado absolutely has to be in the mix. And then Dallas would be the other team that I think a lot of people are talking about. Again, a very, very strong 1 to 12 group of forwards, a solid defense. Heiskanen, I thought, took a step up last year and is now a top 10 defenseman in the National Hockey League. And Ottinger is one of the best young goaltenders in the league. So if you were to look at the West and try to at least come up with a pool of favorites, those would be the 4. If someone else comes out of the West that's not them, I think that will be a surprise to most people.
Carolina is interesting to me as we drift over to the East, because they still have to prove. But boy, the last couple of years they're almost bulletproof. The decisions that Don Waddell and Rod Brind'Amour make, they just seem to push the right buttons.
Yeah, and to me, Carolina, the first issue is the health of goaltenders, because Freddie Anderson seems to get hurt every year, and Antti Rantanen seems to get hurt every year, and they have a good young Russian in the minors, Kochetkov, who signed to a one-way contract for 4 years. He potentially could be the starter at some point this year, and maybe by the time the playoffs roll around. So I think that they feel that they have enough insurance at that position to be fine, especially in the context of the system that they play there. Their defense, if you go 1 to 7, there may not be a deeper defense than Carolina's. D'Angelo helps on the power play. Brent Burns was really good there on the power play. Slavin is one of the best, quote, defensive defensemen in the game. Pesce and Shea are still there. Real good shutdown pair. I mean, they've got depth at that position. And the only thing that I think people wonder about is, who is their best forward? Probably Aho. What will he score? Will he be a top 30 scorer in the National Hockey League? Probably not. So you're going to need to get, scoring by committee a little bit, and then you're going to need to win a lot of low scoring games. And they have been able to do that because, their possession numbers are off the charts, the way they play. They just put so much pressure on teams, and they have teams off balance all the time. And you play Carolina now, what's coming, and it's still really hard to defend against. But I think that often, you look for that one quality that puts a team over the top. And that would be my only question or quibble with Carolina. What is the one thing they have this year that they haven't had in the past that puts them over the top? And I have no good answer for that. Like, I think Austin Matthews can put Toronto over the top. I think that Kucherov has historically put Tampa over the top. Nathan McKinnon has put Colorado over the top. Who is going to put Carolina over the top? Yeah. And I don't have an answer for you. Maybe you have one. Could be Aho. I mean, he's a good player, but
good. Again, they remind me a little bit. They're more talented, but they remind me of the Minnesota Wild. Right? They just kept coming in. They come at you in waves. They come at you in structure. They come at you, and there's nothing that you go, wow, I wish we had that on my team. But boy, I wouldn't mind any of it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. But the one thing I would say is that, and I don't have Minnesota in my favorites, but at least when I see Kaprizov, I think, okay, there's a guy that could put you over the top. They have that one guy that can be a game changer. I mean, he last year, but he could be a 100-point guy this year, and he could be a difference maker for sure. And I don't see that in Carolina, unless it's Svechnikov. Svechnikov's coming off a serious injury, though, had 55 points last year, second overall pick, a guy that I think a lot of people think can become a star in the National Hockey League, but has not got there yet. And then coming off an injury like his, will he get there this year, or will it take another year? Again, the history of that kind of a serious knee injury is that, good this year, better next year.
Two more Eastern Conference teams, one off the ice, one on the ice. Let's start with Ottawa. New ownership, new president of hockey operations. It seems like Steve Staios was just in a Flames uniform not that long ago. What do you make of moving on from the Melnyk era to what is, already they're adding staff? How significant is the ownership change going to be in Ottawa in your estimation?
Well, I think stability at the ownership level is really important in the National Hockey League and all of professional sports. It looks like this is stable ownership going forward, but you never know until someone has owned a team for a period of time. How that actually translates. There are owners that buy a team and are so mesmerized by being NHL owners that they can't help themselves, and they need to know what's going on here. And sometimes the hockey operations group underneath sometimes chafes at that. My answer is always, if it's your team, you should be able to know the answer to that. But it's just difficult to predict. Like I say, it looks like a stable ownership group. Time will tell if that's the case or not. But what I will say about Ottawa is that I really like their team on the ice, because the one thing that they have done is that they've done a really good job of drafting and developing young players. And maybe some of it is just the luck of players falling to them. I look at Tim Stützle. Okay, so the third overall pick in the draft. The two players that went before him have had zero impact at the NHL level. They may still be really good, Lafreniere and Byfield, but it's time for these guys to take the next step. And anything you saw from them last year and probably so far in training camp is that they're not ready yet. And then, Stützle looks like a star in the league and a star at a position that, this was an interesting debate, right? So I think LA probably took Byfield because they were thinking, okay, big, strong guy, Kopitar's getting older. By the time he's ready to step in and be a number one or at least a number two center, that will, coincide with probably the last years of Anze Kopitar. Well, now he's playing the wing with Kopitar because, center is a really difficult and challenging position to play. Whereas Stützle, was seen as someone, well, he'll probably end up having to play the wing. And now he's a center. And I think he's pushed Josh Norris down the depth chart to number 2. So it's fascinating how development turns out. There's drafting and then there's developing. So Brady Tkachuk, seemed like a consolation prize at the time. He's really, really good. And so, they've done well for themselves with the draft choices they've made. And I think the other thing that's impressive is that, and maybe they've had to overpay a little bit, but they have managed to convince some of these young players to sign these long-term contract extensions. And to me, that what sets Ottawa and Winnipeg and Calgary apart is that those are small Canadian markets. And not everybody wants to play in them. And if you have really good players and you can convince those really good players to lock in for the long term, that's a win, So, I hear people say that, Pierre Dorian's job might be in jeopardy and they might want to, go in their own direction because often new ownership does that. I think if you really analyze what he did, analyze the haul he got in the Erik Karlsson trade. Look at these moves, even salvaging something from Alex DeBrincat. Pretty good, he's been pretty good. And so I'm always reluctant to part with someone who, if you look hard at their record, they seem to have done a very good job.
The New York Rangers. I in the glory days of sports writing, I was often told, you always read the guys that you don't agree with because they make you think. And so I've always been a Larry Brooks guy because Brooksy challenges me and, he just does. What's going on over there? Like I haven't paid close attention, but it seems you mentioned Lafreniere, the other, the Finnish young forward.
Kapokako,
yeah. What is going on with the Rangers? Because it wasn't that long ago that the Rangers looked like that was going to be one of the quickest rebuilds in the history of hockey.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's a really good question because I think last year they felt that they were really close, and that was the whole point of bringing in Tarasenko and Patrick Kane as rentals. And then, Kane wasn't what he could be just because of his hip issue, and who knows where he ends up surfacing in the National Hockey League. It's not out of the question that he'll go back to New York at some point when he's ready to play. You also hear Detroit as a possibility. You hear Buffalo as a possibility. So, that's one of the things that's kind of percolating in the background in New York. Like, can you get Patrick Kane, by December the 1st? And if so, where does he fit in? And does he establish that connection with Panarin? Because it didn't seem to be there last year, but that was the reason that they went out of their way to get him. So, I mean, I think they felt that the development of some of those young players was stalled because Gerard Gallant really likes veteran players. And, I can't believe they moved on from him when you look at his results in New York and in Vegas. I mean, it's a win. This is a winning industry. You need to win, and he has pretty much won wherever he's gone. So the fact that they moved on from him suggests that they felt that moving to Peter Laviolette will give these younger players a greater opportunity to flex their muscles and show they can contribute. Well, again, I'm like you, I'm following training camp, and it sounds like it's just been okay. And they haven't really stepped up in a meaningful way to you think that, players of that draft pedigree, first overall, second overall, by now should be closing in on top 6 roles. And that's not the case. Now, on the plus side, they have a really good team anyway, even if these guys are third liners playing with Oodle again. So, I think they're a good team, and they're a team that if everything works for them, and if Shesterkin can play the way he did 2 years ago, he was a very good goalie last year, but he was all world 2 years ago. So, in the same way that, everyone in Calgary is hoping that Markstrom can, return to a level that he was at 2 years ago. I think the feeling in New York is that if Shesterkin can do that, then that alone is going to make them, a candidate for first place in that division. And it's an interesting division too, because, you've got Pittsburgh making one last gasp with this veteran core supplemented by the Norris Trophy winner and Erik Karlsson. I like veteran players, and the older I get, the more I think that, people often look past people who are getting on in years unfairly. And so, I mean, there's a part of me that really wants to see one last hurrah of Pittsburgh. But let's face it, New Jersey is an up-and-coming team, made huge strides last year. Can they hang on to that? Don't know. I'm not sure about their goaltending. They're going to try and integrate a couple of really blue-chip young defensemen in the lineup, but they took 2 experienced NHL defensemen out of the lineup to make room for them. Maybe they go back a half a step, not sure. Rangers, again, they'll win quite a few more games than they lose, enough to win the division. To me, Carolina, New York, New Jersey, I think they're all going to be separated by a couple of points. And then I just don't know what to think of Pittsburgh, but there is a part of me that thinks that they're going to be really good too. So, we'll see how it all plays out. The one team that everyone seems to completely be looking past is Washington.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. So again, I look at their team and it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, Darcy Kemper, was in the winner's circle fairly recently. John Carlson's coming back from an injury. Tom Wilson's coming back from an injury. Netsov is coming back from an injury. Backstrom played half a year last year, probably going to be a lot better this year than he was coming back from that injury. TJ Oshie, you never know with him. He probably always just going to be about a 60-game-a-year player. But boy, with all hands on deck, not bad. And I think we're all a little distracted by the Ovechkin pursuit of the Gretzky record, which I think is 72. So he's not going to get it this year. But that'll be percolating and hovering in the background. And but I think they're capable of winning some games. And, they've got a young coach in there that might, bring some new ideas to the mix and revitalize some of these players that have been there for a while and where it may have gotten a little bit stale. So they're one of those sort of 5 X factor kind of teams that are, sort of what we like to call the mushy middle, and it could go either way. If the injury prone players all get hurt again, and if the younger players in their system don't step up, and if the goaltending is average, then, they're probably 6th in an average division. But there's a possible upside there as well.
Just yet another reason to get an athletic subscription. You were way ahead of the curve because you wrote about possible expansion sites last spring or late winter. And here we are post Board of Governors, and everybody around the league seems to think it's a done deal. 2 more teams are coming at some point.
Yeah, well, I think the question isn't if, but when, and I think that's the messaging that the commissioner tried to pass on to people. That but this has been his pattern too. Even before Seattle and Vegas came in, most of what he said until they had the actual formal solicitation of expansion bids was, we're listening. But we want to stabilize the league. We want to make sure we're strong in the 30 markets that we're in at which they were at the time before we think about 31 and 32. And so the messaging this week was our franchises are all stable. There are still questions about Arizona, but they're hopeful that something works out there. And if they do in the next 12 months get a positive answer about the building, probably that franchise is going to survive in that market. And then they can look at all of the other areas and cities that are interested in an NHL team. Salt Lake City apparently is right there. That's not a name that you heard very much of until the last 12 to 18 months. Houston, of course, as a natural rival to Dallas. The one that has a lot of people scratching their heads is, does Atlanta get a team for the 3rd time? I think most people in Canada hope that it does, because the first Atlanta team ended up in Calgary, the second one in Winnipeg. If they go into Atlanta and it doesn't work, maybe that's how Quebec City gets back.
Yes, exactly.
But to Bill Daly's credit, because he's the one that generally fields the questions, the deputy commissioner of the National Hockey League, he basically is saying, in every interview when it comes to Atlanta, that the market there has changed completely. It will depend, of course, on where you put the arena, but they just feel that that there were a lot of things that contributed to the failure of the first two Atlanta franchises, and a lot of it had to do with unstable ownership, especially the second time through, and that if they can sort that out and get it right this time, they will get it right. So there's a lot of support, I think, for a team in Atlanta. So there's at least 3 American cities that have a legitimate chance to be the 33rd and 34th franchises in the National Hockey. And of course, there's a lot of people in Canada that will say, well, why not Quebec City, or why not my favorite hobby horse? Of course, is the second team in Toronto. And, I think that's just not something the commissioner wants to do at this stage of the game, even though he works for the owners. His voice is the most powerful in hockey, and he doesn't see the advantage of having a second team in Toronto. And he thinks Quebec City is too small. Now, whether he would come right out and say it as brashly as that, probably not, but that's the reality. That they feel that it would be a very difficult city to not draw heavily on revenue sharing for the duration of its time in the NHL, even if it did sell out, and even if it does have a passionate fan base. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes and what the time frame will be. I don't think it's just on the horizon, Rob. I think it's still 2-3 years down the road. I think Yeah, I think there's a few things they need to sort out. Like, slowly but surely, the American television picture is sorting out. That's kind of been, I think, probably, if you think about the workload on Gary Bettman's desk at any given time, it changes all the time. But I think in the last 6 to 12 months, it's sorting out how the regional sports networks are going to operate this year, and how what used to be a fairly robust source of revenue is now catch as catch can, and some teams have stronger packages than others, and and every week somebody signs a new contract, but you don't know what the dollar figure is worth, and you don't know how effective that's going to be, and how many eyeballs will tune in to watch those games. So this is something that I think they really need to sort out in the next couple or 3 years, and once they solve that, or at least get a stronger sense of how much revenue that's going to generate for the larger business of hockey, it's at that point that they might turn and look at expansion again.
So 2 questions have come out of that. The first one, because you brought up television and the RSNs, interesting that the Arizona Coyotes are going to have 1 week to come up with a over-the-air production crew for a local television station. Eric, for so many years, that was the defense in the argument for the NHL. We need to be in these big television markets. Does that even matter anymore? Because that was Houston, right? What, number 5 or 7?
Yeah, and a metropolitan area, just in terms of population. Well, it does. Yeah, it does. I mean, I do think that they're not going. There's no hockey equivalent of Green Bay that is going to get an expansion franchise in the National Hockey League. When you think about listening to Gary Bettman from the time he took over until now, how many times have you heard him use the word footprint? Right, footprint. The idea that why are we going into Seattle? Well, we need a presence in the Pacific Northwest. Why are we going into Vegas? We need a presence in that part of the country. Why are we still in Phoenix? Because that market is really important in the grand scheme of things in the United States. So I don't think that has changed at all, and I don't think it will change. I think that he believes that I think he believes that he still has to have every geographic part of the country covered to be a truly national or North American sports league. Now, I think there are people who know more about television than I do who will tell you that, that another thing that used to be a big dream of the National Hockey League was having like a real important presence on on over-the-air television in the States. So the ABC contracts and the NBC and so on and so forth. And just because of the way television has become more diversified and more scattered, it's less important now. But they still want to, have Stanley Cup playoff games on ABC and a little bit of a presence on a national over-the-air network. But 30 years ago, that was considered the cash cow that would transform the finances in the National Hockey League, and that's not the case anymore. But we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, I watch games when I'm in Canada. I watch games when I'm in the States. I'm probably like a lot of people, where am I looking for the games, and how come I can't find it here? Actually, I think, it's better in Canada than it is in the US. Here, at least you can still get the center ice package, and you can, if I can't find the game on either TSN or Sportsnet, I go up the dial and I can find it on my center ice package. In the States, when I'm down there searching, I don't know, half the time I'm on Hulu, and then I'm on, last year I was on Bally, and then you've got the various local affiliates in California. It's all over the map. It sometimes takes you 5 to 10 minutes to figure out where the game is tonight, which I don't think is a good thing for the National Hockey League at all.
All right. One more on this. Fact check me on a couple of things. One, couple years from now, possibly $3 billion worth of expansion money for 2 teams, of which the owners get all of it.
5 years from now is my prediction. And yes, under the current collective bargaining agreement, expansion fees are not part of hockey-related revenues, and therefore the players don't share in it. Now, I'm guessing that when they next go back into the CBA, that might be something that the players want to talk about. But for now, no, it's not part of HRR. So that those dollars accrue to the teams themselves. Now, again, if the commissioner was in that box beside me, what he would say is, but then, Rob, if we add a 33rd and a 34th team, that means we divide the pie into 1/34th shares rather than 1/32nd. So it's not the bonanza that you think it is. And we would just sort of nod our head and then move on.
Yeah, it's the bonanza we think it is.
Exactly.
My last one for you this week. Just tell me about Connor Bedard. Tell me about Connor Bedard. We watched Connor McDavid come in. We were blessed to watch Ovechkin and Crosby come in. These quote unquote generational players. We've seen quite a few of them. When you think Gretzky, Messier, and Lemieux, and Yager in their prime, Ovechkin, Crosby. Now, I guess you have to put Draisaitl in that group too, don't you? I mean, the way he plays, and now Connor Bedard. What's your expectation for Connor Bedard year one?
Well, it's a great question because, and I don't think you can put Draisaitl in that category because although he's that player now, he wasn't that player in the beginning. I mean, I was talking to my friend Jim Matheson the other day, and he reminded me that in his second year, Draisaitl spent the first 6 games of the season in the minors. There was a much harder transition for him than there was for Connor McDavid, who was lights out great from the minute that he got into the league. But when you think about, I would say, if you think about McDavid, if you think about Matthews, and you think about Bedard right now, what is the commonality there, even though they have different games? It's confidence. That's the one thing. I look at Connor Bedard, and I'm impressed every single time at how confident he is. Because the one thing that you'll notice, Rob, when players move through the ladders, if you're good enough, you become a confident player at the junior level. And if you're good enough, then you become a confident player at the minor league level. And then you become a confident player at the NHL level. It's very rare that someone can go from where Bedard was last year as a junior and step into the National Hockey League and look like often the best player on the ice. And he's just so confident in his own ability. He doesn't seem to have any doubt at all that he can make that step. And so when I see that, I think about how I always hedge, young players coming in, if they get 50 to 55 points, it's a bad team. You got to learn the life. And then you see the way he's lighting it up. And I know it's the exhibition season. You can't read too much into it, but 70 anyway. I think 70 points if he stays healthy, because David didn't in his rookie season.
Yeah.
He's going to probably on that team draw all of the beasts on defense, all the nights that that opposing coaches can get the matchups that they want. So it's not going to be an easy road for him. There isn't any way of playing sheltered minutes behind a more established number one center. But I mean, he's just been so impressive. All you have to do is watch the sports highlights every night and think, wow. And so I think there's a lot of McDavid in a different player. Not as big, obviously, but boy, he carries himself with a natural swagger. It's not fake. Like sometimes I see players with a swagger and it feels put on to me, but this doesn't feel fake. This feels like a guy who just genuinely believes that he is going to have this impact, and not in a cocky way. Like it's not like he's the sort of confidence that you want as a manager of a team. You see this guy come in, like, wow, he's checking all the boxes, and he's 18. That's pretty good. So very, it's an exciting time for the National Hockey League to have another player like him come in, because the year before Slavkovsky, great, but I think actually the best player in that draft. That's the other thing, just watching a few Arizona highlights here and there. Logan Cooley looks like the real thing too.
He does.
He looks like the real thing. If there's anyone that can give Bedard a small run for the Calder Trophy, it would be him. He looks like a really good player. And, again, too early to tell, but Cooley could easily be the best player in that draft. And he went third overall. And that's good for Arizona, because if you have good young pieces coming through, and then you have a potential superstar piece to build around, then, it'll be interesting to see where they're at in a couple of years.
Good stuff. Eric, I appreciate this. It's good to have you back. It's good to have hockey back. You're going to join us again next week, and then we'll get into our regular bi-weekly rotation. So appreciate this. Encourage everybody to check out the notebook on The Athletic today. Thank you, sir. I will talk to you in 7 days.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Eric Duhatschek, everybody. Brought to you by Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com, 76 years in Calgary. 2 locations that are open right now: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, Bow Ridge Road Northwest. 2 more will open up soon, very, very soon. Skis, snowboards, snow skating. Snow skating. Doesn't roll right off, but try it. Check it out. Go down. Go to the McLeod Trail store. You go in there. They're right there. You can take a look at them. Lots of YouTube videos, but check out the snow skating. And again, Ski Seller Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. It is wacky in a way that, Seattle was kind of on the horizon back in 2011 when the Vancouver Canucks were playing Boston in the Stanley Cup final. They ended up doing a story in Seattle about possible expansion. And it was silly. I mean, where did this come from? Why is it just the blowover because the Stanley Cup's a couple hours north? And as we found out, no, there was, legitimate work being done behind the scenes. Vegas started as a bunch of whispers and people guffawing, going, well, major pro sports will never work at Vegas. Take a look at it now with, the A's moving there, and they're going to get an NBA expansion team. I think we're about to go through another expansion in pro sports. I disappointed yesterday when the WNBA chose not to go to Canada, but that had more to do with the building. That MLSE was not interested in giving up the building dates for concerts, or at least had some concerns about that. And as a result, Portland and San Francisco are getting WNBA expansion teams. But I think we're going to see expansion in baseball. I know Montreal's name keeps getting brought up. I think we're going to see expansion in the NBA. The NFL is always, a touchy subject, but games over in London in as many weeks. That's not an accident, folks. They played last week, and now they're going to host Buffalo there this week. Jacksonville's not a great market by NFL standards. London has been a great market. I think with the schedule that the NFL has versus a schedule like the NBA or Major League Baseball or hockey. I think conceivably you could have a team in Europe and team in London, and I still think that might happen. And it was funny because when the Columbuses came in, when the Minnesotas came in, when even the San Jose's coming in and Ottawa coming in, programs like this, which were radio based and usually at night because we still hadn't had all sports talk then, but it was just coming. There was lots of too much, watering down. Where are we going to get the players from? And I don't know if it's, I don't know. The last couple of times that just has not seemed to be the conversation. We don't seem to spend a lot of time worried about the players. Now, hockey's a far more international game, and I think there's really good players out there. But think about adding, 46 more NHL players, 4 more NHL goalies. Sure, you could do that. Calgary's got 3, right? So other teams have 3. So maybe the goalies aren't such a big deal. This is money. It's all money. It's always been money. It always will be money, but at least we're in the open about it now. And NHL expansion is about the fact that 2 more teams will likely bring in the neighborhood of $3 billion, maybe more in expansion. If it's 5 years from now, the Ottawa Senators, when the Melnyk estate started looking at the sales process, that team was valued by Forbes and others less than $500 million American. Then we started to hear, that maybe it was going to go for 800, maybe it was going to go for $1 billion. It went for what it went for, considerably more than it was originally estimated. But I think expansion fees now, you're talking, there's some thought that the Dallas Cowboys could be worth north of $7 billion. The New York Rangers, the Toronto Maple Leafs easily are worth over $2 billion. I think your expansion fees are going to, and as I said to Eric, it's money you don't have to split with the players. That's money that goes directly to the teams. That's what this is all about. I am old enough to remember. Are you old enough to remember NHL European expansion? The thought of perhaps creating a European division and having some interlocking play. I think Putin and Russia has probably poured a lot of cold water on those kind of conversations. But that was initially one of the things that KHL was going to do, was take from that playbook. They were going to have a team in China. They were going to have a team in Finland and a team in Sweden and all of that. And, politics have really turned that, dream south. But I think the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, there was always a conversation about whether or not there'd be expansion into Europe, and whether or not a European division in hockey in the NHL would be good. Lots of effects to this. If you go to 34 teams, you're likely going to have to go to 34 American League teams. Right now, there's 31. Canada does not have a full-time American Hockey League. Lots of reasons for that. Most of them are economical. Now we're told they'll have a 32nd American Hockey League next year. Not that long ago, we had 2 leagues: the International League, the American Hockey League. You could put them where you want them. All of these things are ramifications off of that. And part of me, my heart bleeds for Quebec, because I believe Quebec City I think they've done everything. I think they've been good soldiers. I think they've done exactly what Bettman and Daly have told them to do. On and on and on and on it goes. I just don't see a scenario in which they're going to get. Maybe Arizona, maybe Arizona doesn't work out and they can't get the arena, and they finally call quits. Maybe they get that, but conference alignment's going to be something. And I don't know why we've always been beholden to conference alignment, but here we are. Anyway, let's move on to the Calgary Flames, shall we? It was announced yesterday at City Hall, and the province was involved. The province, living up to their end of the bargain prior to the election, committed funds to some of the work that needs to be done to build an arena downtown. I guess it's going to be called the Rivers Project. You can go online now. I said this to Eric. My biggest complaint in all of it, well, 2 big complaints. Yeah, I know. There's always something, right? You're never happy. I'm ecstatic that they're finally moving on. I have almost covered this story for 20 years. The initial conversations, certainly around 2010, 2011, it heated up. Certainly Calgary Next heated everything up. And then the ongoing drama and the he said, she said, and the middle of the night, kiboshes and tweets coming out from mayors saying it's over and fingers pointing at each side, the other side. Yesterday seemed like everybody's on the same page. Everybody agrees the city needs this kind of infrastructure. I wish there were pictures. I don't get the sense that anybody's going down Main Street doing jumping jacks or anything like that. I don't get this. Jumping jacks would be an odd one. Handstands. How about that? It seems like the concert highway to Edmonton has flattened a little bit. I think next year with Metallica playing in the Commonwealth Stadium, I think we're going to have those conversations again about Edmonton getting bigger and better concerts in Calgary. Certainly the roof at the Dome does not hold what is being currently used mostly in concerts. And with now I'm really getting it deep, but with Spotify and Apple Music and digital, concerts have really become the thing, and the prices are ridiculous and through the roof, and everybody's doing them, and you want to be a destination. The new arena will allow for that. I'd love to see some pictures. I'd love somebody to tell me about the technology. I'd love CSEC to lead in this particular scenario. Excited about what's coming. Show you something that makes you go, "That's cool. I can't wait to step inside of that." And all I'm doing is going on record like I have a voice in all of this. But the community rink, I found it. Let's deal with that. I thought that was really interesting yesterday. That a lot of the messaging from the city and the province led with the community rink. It's going to be, it'll provide Calgary's first downtown community rink. Well, that's cool, but it's a $1.2 billion project, and a community rink is not much of it. It's important, trust me, as a sports guy, as a minor hockey guy, I want to see it, but it's disappointing to me. I believe it's 1,000 or 1,500 seats. We are going to look back. Edmonton is looking back right now going, we should have built it bigger. They have one. Yes, it gets used. Yes, it's awesome. The Oil Kings use it for preseason. The Hitmen will use this one for preseason and all of those sort of things. This city, this organization is going to rue the day they did not put a 5,000 seat practice facility arena there that would allow them to sell ice logos at the Western Hockey League level, that would allow them to put building advertising in at the NLL level, all of these sort of things. Again, not my money. I'm spending somebody else's money. I get that. But let's be perfectly honest. That's the one part of this that I think I love the vision. I love the outdoor plaza. Our dear friend, our wrestling insider and expert, the vice president of retail, Brent Gibbs. Wow, that's a different life altogether. Brent Gibbs. Gibby's going to love it. Like the picture has this giant retail space, hotels. It's going to, in conjunction with what the BMO expansion has been. I think in 5 to 10 years, this is a world-class, awesome thing that's going to bring NHL All-Star games, that's going to bring other events. We need to be as aggressive as Edmonton was about going out and getting events and putting events in the building. I think that's the future. I just wish that there was a way to build a much more significant secondary rink. I think the city needs it. I think the city could use it. I think it would make good business. I do. Clearly they don't. And they're the ones that are doing this every day, and they're the ones that are going through the formulas and all those sort of things. But I think we are going to have that conversation when it's all said and done. We should have built a bigger practice facility, and there's many reasons to do that. I'm excited about the technology that can be in this building. If you look at what's going on down in Vegas with the Sphere, now I'm not suggesting for a second that this is going to have, be a big giant circle like the Sphere in Vegas and what they're doing there, but the screens and the technology and all of these sort of things. We're going to go from pre-dial-up internet to, satellite Wi-Fi in 30 seconds with this building compared to what the Dome is. The technology, my friend Jason Kelly, who works in ticketing for the Flames, for CSEC, the things that they're going to be able to do are going to blow our minds. And that's, I wish they'd share that with us. I wish they'd start. It seems like all we're dealing with are the dollars, and all we're dealing with are the players in terms of the different groups that are working and who trusts who and all of that. Anyway, I'm beating this thing to death. You know what? I'm just looking at it. I want to do this. I got a couple of hockey things I'll come back to. Flames in action tonight in in Vancouver, taking on the Canucks. This will be it. Dustin Wolf was assigned. We shouldn't be surprised. If Dustin Wolf had pitched shutouts in all of his games and didn't allow a goal, there's a conversation. But the big key in all of this comes down to one thing and one thing only: waivers. He does not need to pass through waivers. So he goes down to the Wranglers. And the Flames will start with Markstrom and Vladar. Matt Coronado seems to have made this team. We're looking at different potential players on the fourth line. Schwindt's name is now in there. I think Connor Zary got his crack up in Edmonton. I think we're going to hear from Connor Zary in a while. We'll see. We'll see. It's going to work that way. Do want to flip, though, to baseball. Let's go to the Jays. When last we spoke, the Jays were down a game to the Twins. Well, they got swept by the Twins in one of the most ridiculous, mind-numbing decisions that anybody's ever seen, except for Tampa Bay, because they saw it in the World Series against the Dodgers a couple of years ago. There's Jose Barrios against his former club, pitching as well as he has as a Jay, and he gets yanked. And Kikuchi comes in, and now you say what you will, and Whit Merrifield was really good about this. Terrible decision, but they didn't score a run. And he's right. So, we can beat the Barrios deal till cows come home, but Bichette and Vladdy Guerrero have got to produce. If you're going to want $40-50 million as a season or whatever they're going to want to look, part of that season is the postseason, and they got to get it done. Having said all of that, I would love to be able to sit here and pontificate for you the way that my pal Chris Johnson did yesterday on his podcast. So if you get a chance, check out CJ's podcast with Julian McKenzie, who I'm becoming a really big fan of. And CJ came at it from a fan's perspective. CJ's a writer, and a really, really good writer, and a really bright guy. But he's also a Jays fan, and his takedown of Shapiro and Atkins was, so they've got to go. Sorry, they came over from where? They came over from Cleveland. And what was their claim to fame? Claim to fame in Cleveland. Now, should have never let Alex Anthopoulos go. Cool. Okay. How long are we going to cry over spilt milk? That's what, almost not 10 years, but 8 years ago. 7 years ago, whatever it was. Go get him back. I listen now. Alex Anthopoulos still does lots of Toronto-based media. Go get him back. He's done a great job in Atlanta. The only thing I can add to this conversation, just go get him back. Because MLSE, Sportsnet, Bell, they've got more money than God. Go get them back. Okay? Punt these two. Now, they're not going to punt Shapiro because Shapiro is the face of the rebuild of the Sky Dome. So he's all over that. So they won't, but they should. And what we saw was, again, that intersection of analytics and tradition. And analytics, when it matters, got beat in this case. I don't know. Frustrating. God bless the Expos. That's all I will say. I did this with Jack a couple of days ago. So I was a little caught off guard by how many people considered the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing a work. the league. Travis Kelce's come out and said, hey, listen, this is getting a little ridiculous right now. So he's kind of had enough. But there was reports circulating that the NFL put some pressure on its television partners to, there you go. They're overdoing the situation a little bit, especially my situation. That's what Travis Kelce's saying. But there was also some talk on Front Office Sports that the NFL may have gone to its television partners and said, boy, it'd be really good if you could promote Taylor Swift's movies coming out. So this it's starting to feel like a made-for-TV promotion by the biggest league in the world, the NFL, or at least the biggest league in North America. So we'll watch that one with great interest. Couple of notes. The Cavalry will finish off the regular season at home at Atco Field, I believe, tomorrow. Tommy Wheeldon Jr., manager of the month for the second month in a row in the CPL. Of course, they locked into the playoffs and locked in the regular season title about 3 weeks ago. And our pal Marco Carducci, goalkeeper of the month in September, and was with Marco on Monday. He spoke to hockey coaches, as a matter of fact, as part of coaching day and Hockey Inspires Coaching. 300 plus coaches at Mount Royal. It was awesome. And Marco was there. He was awesome. And Jody Carrington too, by the way. If you ever get a chance to catch Jody Carrington, the single best voice I've heard when it comes to trauma-informed coaching and helping kids and parents navigate their way through some of this stuff. So there is that. And I will finish with two things. One Western Hockey League good news story and one Western Hockey League news bad story. Start with the bad one. Gosh, who saw this? Wenatchee firing Kevin Constantine yesterday after he was suspended indefinitely by the Western Hockey League. A report was made to a third party by a player, I believe, last week. This is, again, in 2007, the same guy was nailed with the biggest fine in Western Hockey League history. It should not be surprised. It's again, we got to do a better job here. We just have to do a better job of taking care of the players. And old white guys and second chances, man, in sports, we're just getting way too many. And then the good news, though, and I love this, like this a lot. Vancouver Giants, tip of the hat to the Vancouver Giants. They're going to salute officials, I believe, later this month. And now, I was thinking about this afterwards. Once you see the jerseys, we'll get the jerseys up here in a second. It's going to get a little confusing out there. But they have become the first hockey team, at least that I'm aware of, that will honor officials by wearing jerseys inspired by said officials. So, yeah, it's cool. I just asked that. There it is. There's the picture. I love it. I was thinking, though, so that there wouldn't be any confusion, I kind of wish they would have worn the ones with red, like in Slapshot. That would have been really cool. But anyway, I hope that the Giants and the Western Hockey League take this as an opportunity to do more than just honor officials, but by promoting and helping their players. Lots of former junior players that are officials of the National Hockey League. It's a path to the NHL for guys. So make sure they do that. And of course, I'm a spokesperson for Project Ref for Kids Sport. So, it's obviously near and dear to my heart. That will do it. No show on Monday because of Thanksgiving. Next Wednesday, Carla McLeod will join us. And a week from today, Eric Duhatschek will come back and join us again. 2 weeks from today, really excited. Ken Dryden has a new book out, and Ken's going to join us. And I've had the opportunity to interview Ken before, and I always enjoy my conversations. Challenging. They are challenging. He makes you think. He really does. But I always enjoy those conversations. So with that said, that will do it. Thanks to Eric Duhatschek. Thanks to Oodle Noodle and the studio. And by the way, a third Oodle Noodle studio is on the way. And by speaking of which, next Wednesday, the Flames have their season opener. You can join us. We will have a season opening party. Barn Burners hosting it. So make sure you check that out. It's all over our social. And then Afterburner comes back post-game that night. So we'll have another season of Afterburner. Thanks to Eric Duhatschek from The Athletic. Thanks to RJ, our producer today. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. And we will see you next Wednesday.